So we did create quite some fuss with this rogue idea of about joining forces between IHE Europe and HL7 Europe, and for creating specifications which are eligible for the European health data space. Some of you might have been present at the strategy day where we did inform a little bit about this already yesterday. Specifications which are eligible for the European health data space. We cannot yet say that these will be specifications for the European health data space because from the standards development organization side we can only make proposals, create specifications which hopefully fulfill the requirements of the regulation and also the thinking of the joint action of XDEHR. Yeah, we still have to actually figure out how we do this then in detail. But the idea is that, and I'm not sure if this is readable from far back, both organizations have their strengths in creating specifications. HL7 is traditionally very strong on creating the FHIR implementation guides, especially in the new FHIR context, where many of them have quite some focus on defining the content, but often are not that strong in defining how the data is supposed to be moved from one place to another. And if these specifications or the FHIR implementation guides include this information, well, sometimes it's a little bit difficult to find or to implement and understand because there's not a strong structure how FHIR implementation guides are to be created. IHE, on the other hand, has with the IHE methodology kind of established mechanism and also established structure for creating the IHE profiles. And which then, through this actor and transaction mechanism, have also a very well established method for defining what each individual system in the end is supposed to do and implement from the API side. And from that also, it's very easy to derive then testing, test cases, test mechanisms, test tools, and where IHE has developed these IHE connectathon events, which are run since 20 years, where vendors can come together and test their products against each other to ensure that, well, everybody did understand the specification in the same way or also identify problems in the specifications. I think on the other hand, but HL7 has been doing better in the initial creation of the specification with what is called FHIR connectathons, where people are just coming together and first discussing and trying things out before it gets written up in a specification. So our idea is to kind of use the strengths of both of that to create a common specification, which will in the end not be branded only by HL7 or by IHE, but will be co-branded. That's why we came up also with this kind of interesting name of Juridike, where we want to then publish the specifications under and yeah, also encourage the joint action and to then recommend these specifications to the European Commission to eventually then refer to them in the implementing acts. If this will become true, we don't know yet. It's just an offer, but it also depends on how good we do the work and to what degree we manage really to create this joint setup, which has done some technical difficulties, and of course we need to also avoid to create confusion in the communication. That's why we had this session yesterday and also this kind of bird or the feather session. But as I said, this is supposed to be a more interactive session, so I don't want to do any presentation. I just wanted to show one diagram, which I'm currently searching, to show a little bit the structure that we have come up with. But it's mostly about commonly discussing thoughts you probably have or questions you might have regarding this collaboration and how this could work. And we have somewhere a separate microphone. I was told that since the session is recorded, unfortunately, if you want to participate in the discussion, we need to hand the microphone around so that you are also audible on the recording then. Yeah. Thanks, Giorgio.
This was not going to be recorded.
Yeah, I just learned it's recorded.
Fair warning, you're being recorded. Don't say anything off the record.
So, anybody has questions or thoughts on creating joint specification on the European side between these both organizations? Maybe I should add for IHE, it's a little bit more difficult than also for HL7 Europe, but because the HL7 affiliates have kind of a tradition of creating specifications also and publish these specifications like HL7 Europe is doing under the HL7 brand, let's say. IHE traditionally does this mostly on the IHE international level with the IHE profiles which are created by the domain committees. The deployment committees of IHE are normally not directly publishing specifications. All they do sometimes is they further constrain the international profiles to some national needs, and this can in principle be documented in the volume 4 of the technical framework. But in this case, this will not work since the domain committees of IHE International only create these international specifications. So for many scenarios we have in the European health data space, there will not yet be an international specification that could be further constrained on that level. That's the one point. And the other point is, at the moment, at least the domain committees more or less decide on their own what kind of specifications they pick up to create, and we don't have that luxury in the European health data space. It's just defined by the regulation what has to be covered and until when it has to be covered. So we are trying to navigate a little bit around this, that we said, well, why not? In principle, IHE Europe has also been at least contributing to specifications through the projects which have been set up by the European Commission, starting even back then with EPSOS, where eventually the International Patient Summary came out of. So there is a certain tradition from the IHE Europe side, at least, but not in the sense that standalone specifications have been created. So we are currently discussing and working how we can make this setup. Maybe, Giorgio, if you can take over for a moment, and I will try to search the diagram.
Well, I had a discussion on that, but before that, Andreas, thank you so much for organizing this virtual FHIR. And my first question is, do you have an agenda of topics that we should, or kind of crowdsource what we should be talking, so that we don't go too deep in some detail, and also that we got everything covered that we want to?
Yeah, frankly, no, I didn't yet get to create an agenda for this session or topics. There were quite a couple of discussions in the Zulab chat on that, which maybe then triggered me, then well, we just should have a bird of a feather session where we can continue this or pick this up, what was discussed there or what was asked there.
Yeah, what I was saying is that I think the first thing is to try to answer to some question that you may have about what we would like to do, clarify for the fact that we are not yet formalized the process, so we cannot say formally there is a joint activity, but this is what we are working on, and this will not avoid us to start substantially to make the work. So this is our intent. And one of the things that we understood from the audience is that there is the wish to start looking to API that could be offered for the data space. And so one of the proposals has been why we cannot start this kind of conversation, let's say in that way, not a real joint group, but some kind of informal conversation among the different community to start that kind of work that we can then formalize when the common procedure will be approved by both organizations.
Yeah, hi. Like the topic of this talk was like, or the headline was, will this lead to more implementation guides or not? And I was wondering, like, let's say you surely will do fantastic work, but let's say your work will be, okay, that's fine, you can use that implementation guide, and if you implement this, you're fine for EHDS. Which would mean there's no reason more to have more implementation guides, right? So what is actually your fear? Like, you came up with this talk with this headline, so I assume you have some fear that this is not the case. Why is that? Because for me, like, generally speaking, I feel like implementations guide are just spreading, like, because everybody can do it and will do it. So it's just a natural thing. There will be more, but interesting to see what actual fears you have.
Yeah, so let's see. I can give you an answer. Yes, we cannot say that, and then I give the floor to Bas. But we are confident that, for example, the specification that has been published about the lab report has been reused already for the cross-border specification. We cannot say these are, but practically this is what has been done. So we hope that the same thing will happen also for the other thing.
I would argue if the European implementation guides are very successful, the measure you can take about that is how many implementation guides are actually created for them. Because as long as there is a tree and they all go down to the same base implementation guides, people specializing that, indicating this is how my hospital uses this, or how my product uses how this is specialized on this API, is actually a measure of the success of the API, not the failure.
Yeah, indeed. This came kind of out also of the discussion on SULIP, where the question was, well, you're yet creating another specification there, but while instead the aim is, well, the one ring to bind them all, right? That's always the holy grail we are after, and in the end we have yet another specification. But nevertheless, of course, the goal is to break this circle a little bit in the sense that there are no separate specifications on the IHE side, there are no separate specifications on the HL7 side, there's a common specification, and this specification is then also on the, at least the European level. Some of the work which is being done in this context is also already being pushed up on the international level, so that hopefully some commonality can be created and the proliferation of specification can be at least reduced a little bit or curbed back, so that not in every corner some other specification is just popping up for the same thing. That's the hope, at least.
That's the hope. And I'm looking at the pin board. And the bottommost question, which is the only one that has a very clear answer, it's actually in front. So if you could just hold it up, maybe.
You mean this one there?
Okay. So if you look at that, the bottommost two questions have a clear answer. Whether it's a correct answer, I don't know. But the bottommost answer is, will EHDS lead to whatever it's going to be in terms of publications and mandate and whatever implementation laws, more FHIR adoption? So are we going to see more FHIR implementation guides? Absolutely. They're going to explode all over the place. Is that something we desperately want? No. Can we avoid it? Not necessarily so. There's more in this world than just EHDS. So if I'm a clinic somewhere, let's say in the Netherlands, one of the member states, I have to deal with government mandates, two logical models. So for me, some of my interfaces will be EHDS compliant. So yes, I will obviously leverage stuff that's already out there, but is it going to be a pure tree, or is it going to be, I comply to this Dutch thing and to the EHDS guide, which is exactly one of the fundamental things that the FHIR community is talking about right now. How do you define compliance against two different parents instead of one single parent? So less implementation guides, I'm not sure. Looking at that, we're looking at more implementation guides. But as Bas says, as long as we have a solid set of parents, and the more the parents are reused, the better it is. So we have to make darn sure that these European implementation guides are useful. Whether they're mandated, are going to be officially mandated by EHDS or not, if we can get them as good as we can get them, okay, they will lead by example.
By the way, I just noticed here also an interesting aspect. will the EHDS lead to a unified EHR market? And seems people are very skeptical on that aspect. The interesting aspect is this is one of the main aims of the European Commission, the unified digital single market, right? But still, participants here see this a little bit critical that this will be. That's.
I can give an answer on both. First of all, on the proliferation of IGs. The whole FHIR tooling and the whole definition of the base IGs will allow my company to say I have an ultrasound device which might need to implement EHDS. Then I can publish an ID indicating exactly in what way I'm doing that. So restricting down to the bits exactly what we're doing and not doing. That IG will be completely compatible with the European one, but at the same time giving a validating one, computable description of how we are using this. And I think that has a lot of value. Regarding the point on the unified EHR market, I think it has something to do with the way European Union addressed the requirements for the EHDS, which came out of the EHN guidelines, which don't mention anything about EHR system interoperability. We then went to Ascended EHR. We focused a lot on the national communication, but not the in-hospital one. And as there are no use cases there and no clear description there, it's currently not on the agenda outside maybe the XNet group. And it worries us. I hope we get a more unified EHR market.
The deliverables from the joint action are out for review. Well, right now are some out of the review for review, and a couple of them will come up in the next couple of weeks and months. And the one which is currently out for review, the ones are deliverables 5.1 and 5.2, which are requirements for EHR systems and metadata. These are extremely critical deliverables. And Bas mentioned the XNet. There's a group of industry representatives which are trying to commonly review and give comments on these. So if you are a vendor, might want to join that group so we have more strength in saying, well, probably that's not yet what we really need regarding the specific definition of requirements for the EHR systems, and essentially also for the definition of requirements for the implementation guides which have to be created. So that's a relatively critical situation, but Elliot.
Well, so two things. One is, yes, you started off talking about what is IHE and what are HL7 doing in terms of IGs for this. And I think we need to look upstream and, at 5.1, 5.2 and make sure that what those IGs are going to be addressing is the right scope. In terms of the question of are there going to be more IGs, I think that's a silly question. It's kind of like evaluating programmers on lines of code per day. I could give you half as many IGs if they're twice as big.
Yeah, so on the matters of the amount of IGs, I don't think it makes any sense evaluating whether it provides value if you have many or few IGs. It's not a metric that brings anything to the table. What matters if an IG addresses a business problem in the end that is not yet addressed by other IGs. And as long as that's the case, we should have as many IGs as possible because it addresses something that brings value. If we have overlapping IGs, then we have one too many.
Yeah, Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, so I'm Eamon Nichol from OpenAir, and yeah, we're going to have a lot more IGs because there's an awful lot of data models and data domains that are just simply not covered in any of our formalisms. And that's fine, and a lot of them will overlap because sorting out the overlaps takes a long, long time. If we can reduce the number of top level, if you like, redundant, IHE and HL7 doing basically, that's great. But there's a long, long way to go before we get rid of it. Just one other point about the unified EHR market. If that was rephrased as a unified EHR in a virtual sense, I wonder if that line would change. So I don't know what the EU actually had in line. Is it I don't mean why one product. I mean something that feels like a single EHR. It's kind of what Don was saying this morning.
Yeah, I think the Commission indeed has in mind this single European market, so that every vendor can sell in every of the European member states, more or less, at least from the regulatory point of view, from the base requirements, the same product. Of course, there are different preferences in various countries, and especially when it comes to EHR systems, they have much more functionality than just sending in data in and out, but they wanted to address at least this specific aspect to ensure that, well, if we I'm as a Siemens Healthineers, probably forgot to mention in the beginning, that if we would sell a product somewhere in Europe and would have to now then go through this claim of conformance, that this is valid all throughout Europe, and we don't need to then get our product certified in Germany, Switzerland, Spain, or Netherlands, or something like that. That's the main goal, I guess, and in this respect of the Commission, which, of course, from a vendor's point of view, makes absolute sense. And by the way, I think also from the buyer, from the user's point of view, because this means they get more products to choose from, so more competition, and in the end also, well, of course, pushes vendors a little bit, but in the end makes the products better, makes the vendors also better if there's more competition.
Hi, Casey from Epic. Speaking as a multinational vendor with customers in many different member states, do we actually expect the base like EU specs to be what is implemented and required by each of the member states? Because I can also foresee a situation where each member state profiles it to theirs and they're mutually exclusive, or at minimum, implementing one doesn't mean you can sell it and use it for the other member states' requirements. So do we see, I guess, twofold. One, do you see member states doing that in ways that aren't compatible across? And two, is there a base version that we could implement, or is the EU spec envisioned to be more of like a virtual parent that is only ever inherited and implemented on a more specific member state level?
Yeah, the regulation explicitly allows that member states can essentially add requirements. They are not allowed to break what has been defined on the European level. So it's kind of a specialization of what has been created on the European level. At least as far as I understand it at the moment, it's unclear what does this mean for the claim of conformance. My hope would be that the claim of conformance is sufficient to be done on the European level. Of course, you nevertheless might not win tenders then in, for example, Germany, if there are specific additional German requirements, but at least they shouldn't be relevant for the claim of conformance. That's more a market decision if they really want to stick to these requirements or not. In general, however, everything which is then generated by maybe a specialized German EHR system, in quotes, EHR system can be anything as we know by the regulation, whatever these systems produce, it at least can be used and can be transported over to another member state and can also be used there, even if some additional constraints are in their data. That's the aim. But what will this mean for the market then? We have to see, or even comment then on these deliverables. There is some of them is on the conformance, which is still due. And we probably really have to have a very close look at that, and ideally even find a way to speak before that with the members of the joint action to first understand their thinking and maybe guide them a little bit.
The first goal we're striving for is that the discussion on these APIs basically goes outside European projects into the SDOs. And once we have achieved that, we can start looking at variation and other stuff. One of the main worries we're currently having is that extended EHR will define the API on its own.
Yeah, if you could open the screen for me. Maybe just as a little bit more explanation of the setup, how we see it, and what our thinking is, what we are currently doing as jointly. So, of course, there's the European Commission, which has triggered all this, but they have set up this joint action, that XTEHR project, where the member states are essentially kind of coming together, evaluating or analyzing the regulation text and having, of course, their own ideas and requirements based on preferences from the member states, and are supposed then to create these recommendations to the European Commissions regarding the technical specifications for the European health data space, which are then meant to be codified in the implementing acts, hopefully only by reference, some of them to standards that have been created by the STOs. And also the European Commission is required to make available this automated test environment, which is then to be operated by the member states, so that vendors who are required to make that claim of conformance have something they can test against. Still unclear to me if we are would be required to test against this, or if it's just an option that some vendors might want to choose. I fear it's a little bit more on the required side, but regarding then influencing what is being done there. In principle, well, that's the primary use. Secondary use would be a separate topic. There's another joint activity on secondary use, but this joint action is doing invited consultations. These rounds are running at the moment. They're mostly on the European level, like the industry associations are invited and some other stakeholders. It's a little bit tricky to get on the invitation list to be able to really comment. But IH Europe has a memorandum of understanding, and also HS7 Europe has a memorandum of understanding with the XTEHR, meaning that also these communities can give feedback. That's why we have created this Industry XNet task force here, which is hosted by IH Europe. It's essentially industry representatives which have a look at the deliverables. And we have an additional memorandum of understanding between HL7 Europe and IH Europe to set up this joint technical committee. That's essentially Giorgio and me from the organizational point of view driving this for looking at the requirements which are coming down, and obviously typological models. This should be the logical models they are currently creating. Some of the extended EHR people are also engaged in the working groups that have been set up already by HL7. And the idea is also to consult based on the memorandum of understanding the XTEHR folks. And HL7 is mostly at the moment running working groups for creating FHIR implementation guides, but we aim to convert these working groups in joint working groups, and the working group BUS is leading, is on the imaging, is intended to be the first one in a joint working group where HL7, or people with the HL7 FHIR focus work in, and also people with the IHE, more workflow and testing focus, work on creating and further maintaining and creating the specifications, and eventually creating these juridical specifications, then as we call them at the moment. The name might stay or not, but that's at the moment the name we are using, just to have one. So just to give you a little bit of understanding what we are trying to set up there. The tricky thing is, of course, for these specifications, we also need to set up some process, some balloting process, having some allocation where these things then will be published. And we will soon set up a kind of a little bit dedicated working group. At the moment we call it API working group, because these working groups are mostly more focused on the content definition. And it has become clear that, well, we need to structure a little bit regarding the APIs, the actor transaction thing, because there will be something on the healthcare provider level, there will be something on the cross-border level, and, well, despite the fact that, of course, each member state can decide on their own what they do, probably it's good to give some guidance what should be possible on the member state level for transporting the information. And one aspect is anyway necessary on the national infrastructure level, which is this health data access service, where natural persons can access to the health information, which needs to be provided by each member state, which of course needs to have some kind of defined API and actor transaction pattern, I would imagine.
And do that all on the timelines that have been established. Just wondering if you can share this diagram.
Sure, yeah, sure.
Put a link in.
At the moment, it's kind of only in our joint technical committee and quite work in progress, but probably we can make it available in some form. Right, yeah. Right. But don't sue us if next week it looks different.
Hi, I want to ask, so you're talking about specifications and workflow and testing. Do you see any role for reference implementations to be made alongside the specification? Because in my experience, it tends to have influence on the specifications itself.
Yeah, absolutely. I think reference implementations are invaluable in the sense that they're extremely helpful for especially the larger vendor community to have a place for looking at something. Frankly, we didn't yet discuss really how to do.
Not discussed yet that. In HL7 Europe, we have a sort of so-called HL7 Europe facility in which we try to make available some reference implementation or tool that can be reused. But we can make those as part of.
And there's also this aspect which I didn't show yet on the diagram. Like there's here on the right side IHE Catalyst, which is from the IHE side operating the IHE connector tons. For this, they need also to provide the test tooling for doing the testing at the testathon, which is kind of also a certain aspect of a reference implementation there.
So I have a question. If you go to the upper right corner of your nice diagram. Yeah, so...
it says work in progress there already.
Perfect. So the XTEHR obviously is out there in draft now requesting comments. And I was kind of surprised that is not out in the open. I received the documents for comments through my national affiliate, and I received it through our interest organization of software vendors in Denmark. But will this constellation of HL7 Europe or IHE Europe also be one of those interested parties? And does that require membership?
No.
So what is stopping us from taking those documents if we already received them as part of IHE Europe or HL7 Europe? Should just put them out there in the open?
I don't think we are allowed to, due to the grant agreement these XTEHR folks have, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, it's not so clear.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have better
it's fuzzy.
idea, because I received the information that the comments are officially collected through the national, let's say, contact point.
Right. Yeah.
However, I know that different communities, like the EMSEG, receive the same file to comment to bring back, so they are not necessarily. And I've been told that if you want to make comment, you can provide, and then work package leader can allow to process
but it's a good point. Probably what we can do is really double check with the leaders of the joint action if at least it's possible to share the documents, even if the commenting has then to go to these established or these defined channels. But,
yeah, that would be pretty safe because else the drawing is sort of impeded if we cannot receive the material, but we should provide comments to it. That's kind of counterintuitive. And also, if the comments should go through the national affiliates or national bodies, then there's something about the arrow there that doesn't make sense because Digital Europe is not under a national authority.
Yeah, but they have also...
Sorry?
Yeah.
But I'm not part of MedTech Europe. I'm part of HL7 Europe.
Yeah.
If you have comments and you're a vendor, you send it to one of us, and we'll try to make sure those comments are accepted.
I have plenty of options to provide comments through my national affiliate and my association. But so I'm not the one that's I'm not concerned about my own needs. I'm concerned about all the people in here that may not have the same options.
Yeah, so one option is if you are a vendor, and a vendor is relatively broad, can relatively broadly used. There are also consultants and whatever. Join the industry XNet. There's no membership required. There's a meeting every Tuesday at 4, I think, now, where you can just join the discussion and also get access to the documents. Either approach me or send an email to Sofia Franconi at
And the sad thing is that this is only one angle of the EHDS. XT-EHR is one project. There's also XShare project.
No. Yeah.
Yes, but all of them have the...
Suppose that the member state work together with the European Commission.
Yeah.
Very big.
And like the project like XShare actually is supposed to provide material that can be digested by the joint action to make the proposal. Unfortunately, the timelines are also not very well aligned on that. And there have been other projects like Expand the Age before that and others, which all did produce some material, which is eventually leading to what they are creating there. That's the idea, at least. It's not working perfectly, of course, and not everything is quite well aligned, but that's how it is.
To the work made by CHR and the other. So, but those that are entitled to propose the input for the implementing act is CHR. This is formally not. And then the European Commission always say, we are those that define implementing acts. Either not, it's here.
Giorgio, do you feel that you answered my question? Do you?
So I'm with Jens on this one. I think we should have, or strive at least, for as much openness, regardless of the feedback channel, which may or may not be official.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I like it that we as HL7 Europe members can just fire off some JIRA comments. It's not an official ballot, but still you are looking for feedback and we're willing to give it. I tried twice, and I represent industry, and I'm reasonably well involved in this community. I tried twice to get on the industry XNet,
really?
Via the secretary, etc., and I haven't received anything. So I'm with Jens. We should strive for openness. So if we can find out, you're closer to the fire than I am, if we can somehow arrange, at least for the materials to be visible, that would certainly help this community, the wider community.
So if anybody tried to reach out already on that, I apologize for this post on some hiccup, got lost, I don't know, or Sophia too busy, approach me, then I can make sure that you get on that invitation list.
Yeah, but in this sense, I think that any hurdle is undesirable. So I think in the spirit of the HL7 and IHG community, where we have everything in the open, If we can use our own FHIR to have the materials available, that would be of additional benefit.
Yeah, there's a Google
However
Drive.
small the hurdle is, it's a hurdle.
Yeah, there's a Google Drive where we have that material available, at least for the members of this group. And as I said, we should approach the XT-EHR folks to get clarification if we can really just make it completely open.
I don't see the issue, but never.
Right. It would definitely make sense, but these guys have sometimes strange ideas.
The thing is, if you're already heavily involved, then you already see everything. But if you are not heavily involved, and that's most of us, you don't see anything.
Yeah.
And that bridge is just something that we need to do something about.
If you're heavily involved, you don't have time to work with the others.
Yeah, that was what I was getting to, that getting involved in this is already pretty involving, and there are these other groups like FHIR. And I'm not saying that they wouldn't have the same influence, or they would have the same influence as XT-EHR, but if you want to be involved there, it takes your time. You have some industry bodies, you left out, for instance, GaiaX, that tries to influence both the entire health spaces ecosystem, and that's also a body where you should be engaged and discussing. So that was my original comment, that there are many different groups where you can get involved. And for me, for instance, the big challenge is finding out which of these groups is a place where I can actually have some kind of an effect.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely agree. There's too much going on at the moment, and it's not easy to decide where to invest the time. Yeah, we kind of try to focus now on giving feedback to these guys, because as Georgia mentioned, they are entitled to educate the European Commission or to make proposals to them, so better try to influence them there.
And in addition to that, there's also the secondary use and EHDS and all of those activities.
But yeah, you have to start somewhere.
That raises probably the most important comment in this meeting. This is too much for any one company to handle. The only way we can handle this and steer this from industry is to work together. Because I get regular mails from my boss, oh, Aldous, you need to review this as well. And I said, I can't. So we need to basically distribute the work, trust each other, and get this done.
Yeah, but somebody needs to do the work in the SDOs, right? That's essentially us.
I have a bit different controversial topic, and that is how all of this is funded. So in EHDS recitals, I don't remember the actual numbers. My kind of state of mind is that they say, hey, EU Commission graciously puts 70 million euros into this, and then we expect the industry to pitch in 2.1 billion that it takes to make this happen. So now we have Philips, Siemens, Epic involved. Do you guys really see it this way? Are you willing to put in the required effort and build, for instance, a reference implementations and all of that?
Well, let me put it a little bit differently. Indeed, there is the problem with the funding in the end, especially when it comes to maintaining all this, because the first releases of the specification will, of course, not be the final releases, right? This is an initial idea, an initial draft, and to do this in a meaningful way, there needs to be some roadmap, some trajectory until things get added to the European health data space. And this requires some sustainable funding of the SDOs especially, and well, also to a degree, because the amount of investment that the vendors can make, of course, has some limitations. Usually it's folks which do this on a part-time base, in the sense they are volunteered by their company to do this and cannot do this full-time. So we need to find some mechanism to get sustainable funding. I'm seeing the next people are standing already out there. And XDEHR, by the way, that they have created, that's this other thing, this alliance, which is at the moment incubated and funded by the XShare project. Sorry, did I say this is funded by the XShare project, supposed to create a hub where all the information is then kind of accessible from. And the idea is also to finance this long term. Their aim is to build up some business model for that. And my hope would be that they could be convinced that some of the funds, which hopefully get funneled from the Commission or from somewhere else to this organization, get then funneled also to the SDOs to pay to a certain degree for some staff or for some consultants for some long-term maintenance on that. If this works out, I don't know.
Regarding your question, will industry fund this? I'm speaking for myself now. Say you're an industry product leader, and I come to you and I say, well, you have this EHDS thing, and you have to implement it by 2031, in the case of imaging. Then I look at the roadmap, and this is beyond the roadmap. So he doesn't worry. Then the next thing he asks, oh, maybe you should talk to my architect. And the architect says, yeah, fine, let's see whether we can prepare for it. What do I need to prepare for? I can tell him, no specs is out yet. I can tell we're working on this one. Has it been agreed upon? No. Do you think within the 90% chances that this will be the specifications you will have to implement? I cannot guarantee that. Then he said, I'm not going to bother with it. Come back the moment you're sure.
Guess we have to close. Thanks everybody for being here. The next people are already waiting, so happy to discuss later during lunch or any other time.